إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين به ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أدى الأمانة وبلغ الرسالة ونصح الأمة وكنا على ذلك من الشاهدين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الذين اتقوا ربكم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. My dear brothers in Islam and sisters in Islam and brothers and sisters in humanity, peace be upon all of you. We bear witness that there is no deity worth of worshipping but Allah, and we bear witness as Prophet Muhammad is the last and final messenger of Allah. We ask him to send peace and blessing on him, on his family, and on all of the Prophet's families, and all of those who follow them until the day of judgment. As Allah reminds us in a couple of verses in the Quran, "O you have attained faith, be conscientious of God with all of the consciousness that is due to him, and do not allow death to overtake you, and you surrender yourself unto him. O mankind, be conscientious of your sustainer, who has created you out of one living entity, and out of it created its mate, and out of the two spread abroad a multitude of men and women, and remain conscientious of God, in whose name you demand your rights from one another. And of these ties of kinship, verily God is ever watchful over all of us." And finally, from Surah Al-Ahzab, "O you have attained to faith, remain conscientious of God, and always speak with will to what bring you out into good, and forbid into something that is bad." As we start this khutbah today, this is just a reminder that IslamiCity is providing the service under these very exceptional and literally once in 100-year circumstances due to the pandemic. And we urge everybody who's listening today, if you feel comfortable and if your city allows you to go and have Jum'ah prayer at your local masjid, please go there. That is a must. You have got to do it. But if you have other circumstances for health reasons, you're truly worried about receiving or getting infected with the COVID virus, then you could do that. And at the end, you may join us for the prayer for Jum'ah, or just pray by yourself for Rak'ah az-Dhuhr. Anyways, we ask Allah at these difficult times, of course, with all the variants of the vaccine, of the virus, to send relief to humanity. And we also ask him to send us wisdom to deal with this pandemic, as people have developed very strict opinions and sometimes very conflicting opinions. And this is dividing us, and we are living in a time where we need less division and more unity to work together to come up with proper legislation and guidelines about how to lead our lives. But pandemic is only something very small. Humanity and our own communities are all dealing with other things: climate change, drought, fires. We have wars in certain nations. We have, even in our nation and other nations, economic insecurity. Of course, many places around our community and around the world are infested with drugs, violence, rise of fascism and extremism on both sides, far left and far right, intolerance of people's opinion or conflicting opinion, income disparity, and the list goes on and on. And in these times, when we're thinking about how we can unite our community, and I'm not talking only about the Muslim community, I'm talking about the community as in the humanity, those that we live, those who are our neighbors, we think and we reflect, do we have anything from the prophetic tradition, from the tradition of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that help us to communicate in a kind way? One that is nurturing instead of conflicting, one that brings us into consensus and respect of each other's opinion instead of fighting and aggression. In these times, we want to see, how did the Prophet ﷺ educate his community? How did he approach them? How did he treat his family, his companions, even those who were sometimes very aggressive and opponent to his opinion? What was his approach in understanding different lifestyles, different characters, and how did he address them, each in a moderate yet effective way? I know that one day, I hope we'll get the chance to talk about how the Quran taught us. And these are, of course, the divine scriptures directly from the Quran of how we deal with conflicts and how we communicate with each other. But today we want to focus very specifically on Prophet Muhammad himself, who himself is inspired by the divine, and how we can integrate, not only learn from the past, but integrate what we learn from him into our daily lives to hopefully have a more harmonious lives around us. And let me start now, whether you're talking from a psychologist point of view, or a therapist, or conflict mediators, consultants to corporations, or educators, it does not matter. We all know, regardless of who you are leaning to, we all understand that you cannot have a single way of communicating with others. But there are always effective ways of communicating with others. And today what we are going to learn will not make us wonder why somebody who's not a Muslim, but also a scholar, Michael Hart, wrote once upon a time a book called The 100, a ranking of the most influential persons in history. And he ranked Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the #1 influencer in history, in the past and also the expected future. And now we understand, because of his, not only the beautiful message, but the way he conveyed this message to others and the way he spoke to other people. So we're going to summarize it, inshallah, into a couple of characters. There are, of course, there are maybe over 15 or 20 characteristics. We'll try to maybe summarize them into 10, go through them quickly, inshallah, and try to remember some of them, inshallah, apply them one by one. The first characteristics that the Prophet ﷺ did was, he was the master of storytelling. He just knew that stories have a very effective way of relating certain ideas that you want to share with other people. So if you want to talk about generosity, about being merciful, about being respectful, he always brought stories. And from the stories, people were able to reflect. And then from the reflection, hopefully they can be able to behave and change their behavior. And I will share with you one of many, many, many stories. So in one of the stories, we know, and I'm not going to read it for you because it would be a very long hadith, I'll just summarize it. The story is, an angel shows up to 3 people from Bani Israel. Bani Israel will be the children of Israel, or the children of Prophet Jacob, alayhi salam, or Yaqub. So the community who followed Prophet Yaqub and his children, like Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, these were known as Bani Israel. So the story is, there were 3 people in the Bani Israel that an angel would come to them. And by the way, this is reported as a Sahih hadith reported by Abu Hurairah. So one of them had a skin problem. He had an albino problem, or an albinism problem. And you know how your skin will not be the same color if you have the genetic problem. The other one was bald. He was bald-headed and people made fun of him. The third one was blind. So the angel will come to them. He comes to the first person. He said, أَيُّ شَيْءٍ أَحَبُّ إِلَيْكَ? What is this thing that is most loved to you? Like, what would you desire the most? And the person who had albino, who had skin problem, told him, just to have a beautiful skin, like just a skin that is, so that people do not look at me and make fun of me or feel embarrassed about it. And he said, then the angel asked him, what provisions, أَيُّ الْمَالُ أَحَبُّ إِلَيْكَ? What type of properties would you like to have? And he said, you know what, I would love to have a she camel who's pregnant, a camel, that I can transport, but also she could be pregnant, so later on you can get milk out of it. And so the angel gave it to him. He put his hand on him, or of course an angel, but and then he got him. He was cured and he got the she camel. Then he went to the bald-headed person and he asked him the same thing. What do you like most? And he said, I just want to have my hair back. And he said, how about the property that you would like? He said, I would like to have a pregnant cow. And the angel also cured him. And then he goes to the third person, he goes to the blind and he asks him the same thing. And the blind person said, I just want to get my vision back. And in terms of property, he said, I just want to have a sheep that is pregnant. And the angel cured him and gave him a sheep. Then the angel leaves them and then comes back to each one. But now the angel is in a different form. It is in the form of the sickness and the poverty that these people were. So he would go to the person as an albino, but now the angel looks like somebody with an albino, okay, with skin problem. And he tells him, by what Allah has given you. So of course, these people do not know that this is the same angel. But the angel is talking to them. He says, by Allah, for what he has given you, because Allah has given you now beautiful skin and the property that he gave you. I am stranded. Could you please help me with what Allah has given me? And the first person says, Al-huquq kathira. Al-huquq kathira means there are a lot of people that I need to take care of. I have my mother, or I have, people that I have to care for. So he turned him away. So that the person who was cured now turns the angels away. And the angel tells him, may Allah give you, or if you were a liar, may God give you for what you came for. I mean, what you were before. If you're lying to me that you do not have any property and you do not have empathy with me. And he goes to the second person who was bald, and he asks him, I need help. By the grace of the beautiful hair that you have, that Allah has given you, could you help me out? And he says no. And finally, he gave him the same answer. Finally, he goes to the blind person and he tells him the same question. And the blind person was the only one who told him, Allah has given me sight and Allah has given me also wealth. Take any money that you want because Allah is the one who gave it to me. And at the time, the angel told him that Allah is pleased with you. And then Allah is pleased with you and he keeps it to you, but Allah is going to have his wrath on somebody else, on the other two who did not recognize what Allah has given them. So by giving this very short story, this 1 to 2 minute story, the Prophet ﷺ was trying to educate how important it is to be empathetic to others, sympathetic to other people's condition. And when Allah gives us wealth or health to be able to help people, we should never forget, of course, to help others when other people are in these situations. And these stories are very, very numerous. Of course, the Quran is full of stories, but now we're talking about the Prophet ﷺ. And he had lots of stories to tell and inspire other people. Hopefully that people will be able to know what they have and give to those who do not have. The second characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ, other than being a great storyteller, he was a master of dialogue. In language education, we call it an interpersonal communication. So he was great about dialoguing, not only telling a story, which is more presenting, but actually interacting with people. So sometimes he would ask questions and then wait for people to wonder, because sometimes people didn't know the answer. And one of the stories, that he did, he would tell his companions, "Atadruna min al-Muslims? Do you know who Muslim?" And the companion would say, Allah wa Rasulahu wa Rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and his Prophet knows. So look at this nice dialogue. He did not just come preach to them. He would say, do you know what a Muslim is? They say, well, Allah and his Prophet know best. And he would say, Al-Muslimu man salima al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. So the Muslim is, he didn't say them, the Muslim is the one who prays 5 times, the one who fasts or so on. He said the Muslim from Salima, which is peace, but safety also. The Muslim is the person who the other Muslims are saved or spared from the harm of his hand, or her hand for that matter, or his tongue or her tongue, people who speak against. This is a true Muslim. And then he will ask them also, أتدرون من المؤمن? You know who is the mu'min, who is a believer? Because usually we say mu'min is a believer. And then the same thing they say Allah and His Prophet. No, he says, من أمنه الناس على أموالهم وأنفسهم. Those من من أمنه الناس على أموالهم وأنفسهم means whoever people entrust with their own property and with their own selves well-being. So a believer is not only somebody, because iman is not only that level of faith, but actually aman means security. So he's telling them the believer is a person who's, people are trustworthy. And then he will ask them, do you know who is the muhajir? Who is the person who is an immigrant? They say, we don't know, what is it? He says, the Prophet ﷺ tell them, man hajira su'a wajtanabahu. Whoever immigrates, which means leaves alone, abandons, keeps it away of anything of harm. That is a true immigrant, a person who not only migrate from where he is or she is, but somebody who also leaves and avoids any form of harm. So this form of dialogue, he will ask a question, they will answer back. He will ask a question and answer. That always motivates them. It intrigues them. Because people think that the Muslim is the person who's praying, but suddenly he gives in another twist to it. It's always say, you know what? I never thought about it this way. And he was a master of doing this dialogue. And if you go back to the collections of the hadith, you will see so many of these examples that he would say, and then he gives them lots of other examples. Let's move to another one of his Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's qualities. He was indeed a person who sometimes swore by Allah before making a serious statement. So sometimes he would tell a story, sometimes he would ask questions and ask for an answer, and then we correct or introduce. But sometimes he would swear by Allah. And you know that we are not to use Allah's names in vain. So usually when he swears by Allah by starting, which we see it in the Quran, but we see it in the in the hadith, the collection of the hadith, it means that, look, watch out, I'm swearing by Allah now. Listen to me, this is a serious thing. And many, many times you say, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ, by the one, which is Allah, of course, that my own soul is in his hand, means Allah can take our lives and then bring it back. So for example, he would say one of the hadiths, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَا تَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ حَتَّى تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَا تُؤْمِنُوا حَتَّى تَحَابُّوا أَلَا أَدُلَّكُمْ عَلَى شَيْءٍ إِذَا فَعَلْتُمُوهُ تَحَابَبْتُمْ. And then of course they would all wonder, he says, أَفْشُوا السَّلَامَ بَيْنَكُمْ. So he says, by the one whose my life is in his hands, you shall not enter paradise until you believe, and you shall never be a believer until you love one another. Should I not show you something that if you do, it will bring you closer to each other, you love one another? And then of course everybody would be listening, and he says, أَفْشُوا السَّلَامَ بَيْنَكُمْ, spread peace among each other. Means do not fight among each other, do not have conflicts among yourself. So he had a different style. Sometimes he will present, sometimes he'll say, come here, I have something very serious about you. And sometimes he would say this, we know it from the seerah, from his, that he would sometimes say it after he sees people starting fighting over it. Right away, he's very angry, but he's not going to go punch them. He's gonna say something big by swearing by Allah. And this brings everybody's attention. Another one of the qualities of the Prophet ﷺ as a master communicator is he sometimes would preach with humor. He was not always serious. So sometimes he would be very serious by swearing to Allah, by Allah, of course. Or sometimes he would, bring some humor or some kindness or some wittiness. You say, oh my God, my goodness, this person is so witty. When you talk to a friend, say, he's always clever about something, doing something that you did not expect. And I'll give you one example of the Prophet ﷺ. One day, one person came to the Prophet ﷺ. He wanted like an animal to carry his belonging to his house. So he must have bought something and he wanted to carry it from one place to another. So he's asking for the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, okay, so you want something? No problem. I'm going to give you the offspring of a she-camel, of a female camel. I'm going to give you the offspring, like the child, but the animal child of her. And this person came and told the Prophet, but he said, but what do you want me to do with an offspring of a she-camel? Because usually when I tell you I'm going to give you something, an offspring, you think that this is just a newly born animal, and the newly born animal does not have the strength of carrying anything, let alone furniture or belongings, personal belongings of somebody's house. And the Prophet ﷺ would tell him, isn't a big camel also an offspring of a she camel? Because a big camel, which is now adult, still once upon a time was a baby, and it came from a female camel. So he always brought these wittiness. So he was trying to catch him by surprise, of course, playing on the emotions. Like, you know what, I'm gonna give you something, but you think that it's a small because I told you it's a baby. But really, each one of us, even if we're 80 years old or 100 years old, we're still a baby of a mother, because we came from a mother, at least biologically, we came from a mother. All right, so this is one of many, many examples, of many hadiths. When he would smile, his white teeth would show up, and then he'll bring some humor or some jokes to other people. When he would advise people, and then the companions will say, I cannot handle it, this is too much on me. He will always bring it down, 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 and he would smile and say, okay, fine, just go with the minimum that you could do. Another one of the qualities of the Prophet ﷺ was he was a master of being brief, being short. As in we said in English, we said, make it short and sweet. Malcolm X, Haj Yusuf Shabazz, Malik Shabazz would say, make it plain. So the Prophet ﷺ made it plain, small and short and sweet. If you go back to his khutbah from the past, the collections of his khutbah, really you could put his whole khutbah into half a page. I mean, you read it, 20, 30, 50 sentences, and that's it. Sometimes we give much longer khutbahs, and we should not, if we want to make it nice and sweet and brief as he has done. And he was, by the way, brief in everything. We know that his prayers, for example, when he prayed other people, when he was leading other people's prayers, he made it in moderation. He didn't make it too short, but he didn't make it long, because he knew that people some of them would be tired, some of them would be old, some of them may have children. So he was very, very moderate. He was not excessive on each side. His khutbahs was, as I told you, short, and he never made his khutbahs boring. That's it. It's like, make it small. And this is what we do, by the way, even in education today. We tell teachers, as we train teachers, tell them, when you're talking every 6 to 8 minutes, maximum 10, 12 minutes, change the activities on the students. Our attention span is usually about, 9 to 12 minutes. So make it brief. Don't talk for 2-3 hours. In the art of speech and debate today, in competitions of art, speech and debate, usually you're limited to a 10-minute speech. That's it. After that, you're going to lose people's attention. And I'm already a little bit over 10 minutes. So inshallah, I'll try to finish in a few minutes. Okay. Another one of the qualities of the Prophet ﷺ was he was a master. He was very passionate when he spoke. And when we were saying passionate, like he was emotional, he would raise his voice, he would lower his voice. And that emotion shows his sincerity in his action and his belief system. And we say that the Sahaba describe him actually in one of the hadiths. They say that at one point in time he was moving on the minbar. Minbar, that's the podium when he was speaking, that they thought that the minbar was going to collapse. So he became passionate about it. He wasn't just speaking and boring, with no intonations. They thought that the whole thing was shaking, that it was going to collapse. Another one of the qualities of the Prophet ﷺ is he also used sometimes metaphors. Okay, so sometimes, remember, he did stories, he asked questions and answers, he would swear by Allah, he would interject humor, he would be emotional, and sometimes he would add metaphors. He would say, you are like this. For example, one of the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, مثل المؤمن الذي يقرأ القرآن مثل الأترجة. الأترجة ريحها طيب وطعمها طيب، ومثل المؤمن الذي لا يقرأ القرآن مثل التمرة لا ريح لها وطعمها حلو، ومثل المنافق الذي يقرأ القرآن مثل الريحانة ريحها طيب وطعمها مر، ومثل المنافق الذي لا يقرأ القرآن كمثل الحنظل ليس لها ريح وطعمها مر. Anyway, this is a famous hadith. You may have heard it many times. He's saying, the example of somebody who reads the Quran, somebody who is a believer and reads the Quran, is like, it is just like atruja. Atruja is a type of citrus, by the way, that smells very, very good. It tastes very good, it's citron, it tastes very good, but when you pick it also, it has a beautiful smell. But the person who's a believer who does not read the Quran is just like a date. The date, the taste is good, but it has no smell. And he says the hypocrite who reads the Quran is like a raihana. Like, by the way, basil, there is a bitter basil and there's a sweet basil. He's talking about the bitter basil, the plant. Okay. It has a good smell, but its taste is bitter. And the example of the hypocrite who never reads the Quran is just like al-handala. Al-handala is a type of it's just like a watermelon, but it's a very bitter watermelon. Okay, it does have no smell and then no taste. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ, I'll try to finish with very fast without giving so many examples. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was also very good at giving imagery. Okay, so he would give you examples. So he would draw, for example, he would go on the street, not on the street, he would go on the dirt and then draw a line. So one of the hadiths is, of the referred of the Prophet says, خط خط أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم خط خطا مستقيما فقال هذا سبيل الله ثم خط خطوطا عن يمينه وشماله فقال هذه السبل وعلى كل سبيل الشيطان وعلى كل سبيل شيطان يدعو إليه. So he did one straight line in the middle and he said, this is my pathway. It means this is the pathway of Allah. And he did some other pathways on the sides, on the left, on the right. He said, this is the Satan's. And if you want to follow Satan, you follow it. But my line is in the middle line. It's very straight. So he was very graphic. I mean, today we talk about PowerPoint and Prezi and Keynote if you use, the Apple's PowerPoint version. But he was very visual. So sometimes he would talk, sometimes he would act, but sometimes also he was very visual. He would just draw something. He also used something called TPR. I mean, we call it. He was a master's in physical response. Okay. So he would show sometimes his hands. The famous hadith when he said, "Me and the person who takes care of the orbits are like this," and then he pointed at his index finger and middle finger, and he put them how close they are together. Okay, so he was also sometimes physical. In teaching, we say if you want a teacher to teach certain languages or certain things, they have got to be physical. They have got to act what they are teaching. And this is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ. Let me finish with one of his characters. Although there are so many more characters, he was also good at demonstrating what he's doing. So sometimes he spoke, sometimes he shouted, sometimes he acted, sometimes he showed with his fingers, sometimes he drew, but also sometimes he would demonstrate. In education, we call it modeling. As a teacher, you model if you want to have other people to do it. So, if people didn't know how to do ablution, wudu, he would go and show them, this is, follow me. This is how I do my wudu. This is how I wash. Or he would pray in front of them. And he would tell them, what you saw me do is my prayer. So always follow my prayer. أقول قولي هذا لي ولكم فيا عباد الله استغفر الله العظيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم إلى يوم الدين. Again, let me repeat to you all of these couple of characters that we said, and we're going to see how we can use them in our daily lives, inshallah. So the Prophet ﷺ had great characters. Inshallah, we'll try to apply these when we want to communicate with others, whether they are our families, our children, our friends, our communities, our bosses, our employees, any person that we get, our neighbors. We could use different strategies to best affect with others. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, remember, was a master storyteller. Use a story if you feel it appropriate. He carried dialogue. He did not always dominate the dialogue. He would take back and forth, ask, listen, ask, intrigue, and then give the answers. Sometimes when something is important, he swore by Allah to bring people's attention. Sometimes he used humor and kindness to bring people very soft, and people are very appealed by this approach. The Prophet ﷺ was also very brief, so he did not just go and preach for hours and hours. People could not take it. Make it short and brief and to the point. He was sometimes emotional, and he showed others how he was caring. The Prophet ﷺ also used metaphors. He always gave examples of people who are familiar with things. So today, if we're talking about somebody who's dry, we talk about drought. If you're in a heat place, you say, hot. You can talk about, give examples about images that people are very important, familiar with. He was responsive with his own body. So he would move his body. He was able to always act it out and show how passionate he was. And he always took opportunities. He sees opportunities. There are so many examples that you can say. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك اللهم على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. We ask Allah to make us hear whatever comes from Him and the guidance of the Prophet and follow it. And we ask Allah to always stay away from anything that keep us disputed in conflict and disunited. We ask Allah during these difficult times to bring a cure to humanity, to have mercy on all of us. We ask Allah to make us as Muslims role models and role models of moderations, of kindness, of wisdom, and in this context of people who really communicate well with others. وآخر دعوانا والحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين وكان الله بكل شيء عليما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا وسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا هو الذي يصلي عليكم وملائكته ليخرجكم من الظلمات إلى النور وكان بالمؤمنين رحيما. تحيتهم يوم يلقونه سلام وأعد لهم أجرا كريما. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. يا أيها النبي إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا وبشر المؤمنين بأن لهم من الله فضلا كبيرا ولا تطع الكافرين والمنافقين ودع أذاهم وتوكل على الله وكفى بالله وكيلا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام.
Let's wait 1 minute for those who are doing the 4 rak'ah prayer. The Jum'ah prayer is now concluded. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Danny, for your inspiring khutbah, and Brother Mustafa for leading the salat. Wassalamu alaikum.